Hello again, and welcome to The Luxury of Choice, a B2B sales and business podcast brought to you by the training team of George James Limited. My name is Steve Vaughan. I'm a sales trainer at George James, and I'm also the host and producer of this podcast. And today I have my two colleagues, Jane Green and Prue Leighton, with me. So Jane, Prue, how are you both? How are things?
Go first, Jane.
We've all been very polite. Yeah, very well, thanks, Steve. Thank you. Yeah.
Good.
I can see a little bit of nice sunshine out of my window today, so that's always very welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. And you, Prue, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, actually. I'm planning a holiday. There's nothing better than planning a holiday.
That's great.
So, yeah. So I'm going to go to Hungary. I've never been before. So, planning a couple of weeks on Lake Balaton. I'll let you know later in the year how it was.
Beautiful.
I've been to Budapest a few times, and one of my best memories is if you like red wine, it's a nice place to go. But we won't go any further on that. Let's just pop that thought. You got a holiday coming up, Jane, anytime soon?
Well, so I'm also planning, shock and horror maybe, to go interrailing, but via hotels, not in hostels, because I'm not that age anymore. So, with a hope to go around about 5 cities and sort of hop around a couple of nights each city or so.
That'd be amazing.
Explore. So, can't wait later in the year.
That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, we've just booked a week in Croatia in June. So
beautiful.
The best. You're right, Prue. Planning a holiday and all that stuff is fantastic, but it does take time to plan a holiday. And that's a very, very, very cordy segue into what we're going to talk about today. So today's topic is, how do I find enough time to do all the stuff I'm supposed to do? And it's a thing that we hear over and over and over again when we're running training courses. And of course, we do have training material on this. I think in today's world, we have all this technology that we are provided to make things easier for us, faster. We've got AI now, we've got smartphones, and yet I think it's never been harder to find time to do stuff in my personal experience, and I'm sure we're going to look at that between us today. So we're going to knock around, how do we find time? How do we manage the time constraints that are upon all of us, regardless of our roles in business? So where do we start with this one? It's a big topic. First of all, do you agree with the point I've just made, Prue? Do you think it's never been more difficult to manage time or to organise ourselves?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think we all want instant responses to everything.
Yeah.
The patience has gone. I recall whenever I do training courses, I try to often make people amused, because when I first was in sales, I used to have customers wrote to me, put envelopes and stuck stamps on letters to request quotations. And now it's like, we have this instant world and we're part of it, so we can't point the finger. And anyone who's been on any one of my programs knows that I often introduce it by saying, the interesting things about being in a commercial role in this industry is that you will never, ever get to the end of any working day, close your computer and go, I've done everything I need to do today. It is never going to happen to you again in your working career. Even if you work 16 hours a day and weekends, there's always something else you could do. So it's not about doing more. It's about really being careful about the things you choose to do.
Absolutely.
There's that very kind of commonly used phrase. It's not about being busy. It's about being effective.
But it's never been truer, I think, really.
And if you think about managing time and finding enough time, it's not enough time to be busy, it's enough time to be effective.
Your thoughts on this, Jane?
Yeah, very true. I think that instant world that we live in now, we expect to reply immediately to anything that we ask for. But also, I think we're in a business world of many distractions, because there are so many tools. There's so many things that we're having to think about, so it becomes a bit distracting. So, our focus and our minds can be more distracted in terms of the way we approach things.
Mm.
So that ability to we'll never complete our to-do list. Like, we get to the end of the day, like Prue says, there's always things left on the to-do list. And I quite like that, but I do like the satisfaction of ticking things off my to-do list.
Yeah.
So if it's a bad day particularly, I add some things on that I've already done, just so that I've got some ticks on that. It's a mindset. It's about keeping a positive mindset when it feels maybe too busy, and that often can lead to feeling a little bit overwhelmed.
Yeah, great thoughts. So we're not a large company, George James. We're not a big corporate organization. Although, like any company, we have our systems and processes, but we've all worked for businesses that are very large corporations with lots of systems and processes and workflows and things. And one of the things I hear over and over and over again is, I've got all this stuff to do for the company and I haven't got enough time to do any selling. You know, HR need me to do this and finance need me to do this and legal need me to do this. And has that got worse, do you think, in recent times, or has it always been there? Am I perhaps overplaying that one at all?
I think it's always been there this century. Maybe not last century, but I think it's always been there this century. I think that in large organisations, they create their own work, and it's not unnecessary, because depending on your viewpoint, that's really essential for you to complete what you have to do. But yeah, the bigger the corporation, the tougher it becomes. I don't think it's got worse, actually. I think it is what it is. I think there are some tools that have made us be able to interact more simply, which has helped a bit. But rather than it helping, it just means that we interact more. But that's up to us, you know. If you want to have lots of stuff in your inbox, number one, reply instantly. Number two, reply to all. If you get an email in and you reply instantly, then you will get lots of other instant responses. And that reply to all button or default is awful, because other people join in. And I think it proliferates communication. And partly that's we should have that discipline ourselves. I hate that button, reply to all.
Yeah, me too. I'd delete it from Outlook if I could. Yeah. And the danger, and why we say that, by the way, dear listener, is if you hit reply to all, then, if you've got 7 people on the email and you hit reply to all, you're going to get 7 replies potentially. So the whole thing becomes viral and sort of proliferates, doesn't it, really? So I'm of an age, but like you, Prue, where I do remember the world before email, because you referenced, getting letters from customers. Email is a great enabler, but it's also a great time distractor, Jane, in my experience. And I used to have colleagues, all they seemed to do was write emails all day. That was their job, it seemed. But how do we work with email? How do we make email an enabler rather than a distractor? That's a big question to ask you, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, email can be great. It's identifying what we want to use emails for, because it's brilliant for facts, getting information out, quite quickly. But it doesn't necessarily always get tasks done, but we can use it in a very specific way. If we want to get some instant answers, I think we demand that in the way that we work. But of course, an email doesn't necessarily do that. But one of the challenges, of course, with email is that the little notification that can come up in the corner of your right-hand corner of your computer, and you can get very distracted by what happens on emails. And I remember going through a time years ago where that probably was a more recent thing, actually. And it just, every email kept popping up in the corner. I was trying to get on with a task, and I was being very specific with a task list and priorities of things to do. And that was great. So had I been being challenged by, are you working on your priorities? I could have said, yes, I am. But I'm now being distracted by all of the emails that are coming in, because I can now see them, really quickly, even though I've got something else open. So email is great because it gets information out very quickly, globally, instantly. But of course, what we tend to then get back is we get all of the disruption that affects our day from it. So use it wisely. Turn off those notifications, please. It was the best thing that I ever did with my email, just to turn notifications off. And I need to take your advice, not reply to all.
Do you remember that thing that it would have been Windows 98 or even some that kind of era, but that clip it thing, the paper clip that used to pop up. I used to punch that when it came up on my screen.
The advice.
If you don't know what talk about, dear listener, go and look it up and Google it. But Prue, you are the best person I know for being able to manage email and be in control of your email. So would you want to share a little bit about how you do that? Because I think you do it brilliantly.
I'm ruthless, Steve. So yeah, I don't have my notifications turned on. So today, when I sat at my work desk, opened up my email, of course. But the first thing that opens on my email is my schedule, my calendar, because it told me that I was recording a podcast at 9:00 this morning. So I could get prepared, brush my hair, make sure there was no laundry behind me, all those things you have to do. Because it opened on my calendar, if I'd opened it on the default, which is my inbox, I promise you, I would have been drawn into things that had come in overnight. And suddenly I'd probably get a message from you, Steve, saying, "Hey, Prue, I think we're doing a podcast this morning." And I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, sorry, Steve." And hop on, not in the right frame. So I'm ruthless about opening on my schedule and letting that define my priority, because it's what I've said I'd do today. I only interact with my inbox at fixed times in the day. I'm not, if I'm like today, I'm working from home, I'm not saying I only do it at 10 o'clock, but I'll only have 2 sessions on my email today that fit in with the other priorities I have. And it means that I can actually like bulk process emails. And often when I hop into an email chain, by the time I've addressed it, it's all sorted. I have to do nothing. But if I'd immediately responded to it, I would have had to do more work and lots of people trying to resolve things. So I'm really don't interact with my email that often. I put my out of office on and I stick to it.
You do.
How many people say, "Well, I put my out of office on," but then reply? So what are you telling your colleagues? You're saying,
and your customers for that matter.
And your customers, I'm out of office, I can't reply. And so the next time that you really are out of office, and we were talking about holidays, they feel let down because they normally reply though, because I'm special. So stick to your rules. So that's probably the things that I do, but I definitely never reply to all.
And when I've covered this in training courses myself, and as you say, Jane, I totally agree about switching off the notifications. What I'll get sometimes is that, but I don't want people to think I'm not around. I want people to be really responsive. I want to help my customers. So if we do what Prue says, and I think we should, how do we deal with that sort of built-in desire to be as flexible and responsible as we can to our customers, which is an admirable thing to have? Mm-hmm. How do we manage that without, disconnecting ourselves from that sort of alert that comes up on our computers? How do we manage that so we feel we are still responsible and responsive, should I say, to our customers?
We take control of it.
Yeah.
Or I think is the only thing we can do with that is to try and own that, but not by being super responsive to everything that comes in. I've been in a training session and seen people replying to their computers are down, but if the computer is up, which is the kind of the horror moment, and somebody's replying to that email that's come in, and it distracts us. So how do let's take control over that moment, not by having to respond straight away. Typically nobody's going to die and the world isn't going to end if we don't reply to an email straight away when it's come in, and often if people overuse it, there's sometimes on an email, it's at high importance. That might, I kind of don't like that. I sometimes want to avoid those a bit more, if I'm honest. But if they were used truly, then that would be really helpful. If it's that high important, then maybe pick up the phone to me, and have a conversation. But I think it's taking ownership, isn't it, of that. But for somebody that is very driven to respond very quickly, I think when we're sometimes new in a role, we want to respond quickly. We want to show that we're keen, that we're listening, that we're available. But actually, we may not have, if we start to train ourselves and our mindset is that we've got to respond super quickly, we're not really giving ourselves thought process to be able to deal with what needs to come up and how we need to handle that response. If we are responding to the notification, it often means we'll have probably sent that email and want to withdraw that email because I've actually not thought about that properly. So there's a real danger in being really responsive too quickly. Give yourself some thinking time, give yourself some processing time, and then work out when an email comes in, when is the appropriate time with your priorities of the day to deal with that.
That's a super point. And I think, we all carry around these super high-tech computers in our pocket called mobile phones. And if it is really, 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 really business critically urgent, I know with you, Prue, I'll give you a call. Why not say the same thing to our customers? If it absolutely is, if you really need to get hold of me quickly, give me a call, leave me a voicemail message if necessary. I'll pick it up. But if we do just get into that mindset, I've got to respond to every email that comes in immediately, then recognize the impact it's going to have really on your planning, your prioritization. It's going to be impossible really, because you're always dealing with things that are out of your control really. And I want to pick up on that point now, if I can just move on to something slightly different really. And that is things that we can control versus things that we are affected by, and things that we can influence as well, really. I find, particularly with new people in the commercial world, they find that very difficult to understand the difference between those things. Prue, what are your thoughts on things that we can control versus things that we are impacted by, and how that affects our ability to manage time?
Well, if you think about the sphere of influence, in terms of what am I in control, what can I influence, and what is out of my control, a very classic model. In relationship to time, the things that you can control the time that those things take. You can control how much time you do it. You can define the importance of it, how much time you should spend on it, and how to do it. And normally it's within your, as well as in your control, it's within your competency. The further away we move from that, the more time, energy we can use up with having less and less impact. It's further and further away from us. So if we have something in our business that's driving us mad, and I know all the listeners will be making a mental list now of all the things within their own business that drive them mad.
Probably several lists, yeah.
And turning over the page and writing again. Those are things that we can waste so much time on, but we have no impact on them. We waste time stressing about it. We waste time talking to our colleagues, dare I say, complaining about it, using up all that useful time. And it's actually something that we really cannot influence. Would be much better working out how to deal with it rather than complain about it and say, if only they did their job correctly, or if only we got this product, or if only we had that. And they're just fruitless, frustrating wastes of our time. Focus on what you can do. Focus on what you can have an impact on. It's so much more satisfying and efficient.
What are your thoughts on this, Jane?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that part of, we get very consumed by things that I do personally, and probably will continue to be concerned about things or things that irritate me, or things that I would love to see done in a different way. I can get quite consumed by that. And I have to work out actually all of my brain matter time, my thinking time, am I spending it all on things that don't really I've got any influence or control on? When I start to then bring that back in, I used to often draw myself. I had a manager years ago that would draw the big circle of concern. He'd say, right, what are you thinking? And he'd plot all of this. And it was scary when I think back now. And he would go, right, all of these things are in your circle of concern, this kind of very traditional way of looking at it. And then he'd say, right, none of that is in your influence, Jane. Let's get down to the things that you can influence. And it was very releasing to do that.
Absolutely.
And I take myself back to that every now and then to say, actually, where am I thinking? What am I actually in work, in life? It's a really good practice. What am I actually thinking about? What's consuming my time, my processing time, my energy? And just bring it down to actually, what can I influence? And out of that influence, what can I really focus on?
Absolutely.
I love what 3 things am I going to accomplish today that are within my influence? And that starts to really have an effect on how we use our time wisely.
Absolutely. Yeah, great thoughts. So when we have a training module on planning and time management and effectiveness, what other things do we hear from the people we're training that they find challenging in this area? What other things come up? Any other thoughts on that?
I think that I was thinking of our 5 golden rules without saying our 5 golden rules. I think email is always number one. Yeah. People find email the biggest. They feel it's the biggest waste of their time, but when you challenge them, they're contributing to the waste of time.
Correct.
I think the other thing is that that comes up is the idea of using one calendar, diary, schedule, whichever word you would like to use. So whenever I work with someone who says I'm too busy and I don't have enough time, enough hours in the day to do everything, the first thing I say is, can I have a look at your calendar? And I will guarantee you, as they open their calendar, schedule, whatever it is, they go, oh, yeah, not everything I do is on there. And I go, okay, now you don't know. Now you don't know. And other people don't know what your priorities and how your time is planned. No wonder you're feeling completely like you're not getting everything done. If you don't put it down and look at it and say, is that achievable or is that not achievable? You don't have a hope of lassoing your time. Last year, I was at a training program with a big company, and over a drink, one of the delegates said to me, I just don't have enough time, Prue. I'm like, this is just too much. So I said, let's have a look at your time. And it was the one time when she had everything in her calendar. But I had a look at her calendar, and for every day of the week, she had 12 back-to-back Teams calls every day.
12?
She was technical support covering a global, she had a global remit. So she was working across multiple time zones, and she was technical support, and she literally had back-to-back Teams calls. And I said, well, I've only got one piece of advice for you. He said, what's that? I said, learn to use that 2-letter word, no. You know, if you are in high demand and losing control of your time, you have to learn to say no.
Great point.
You just have to do that, because you're not going to get less to do. If you're good, you're always going to be asked to do more. So learning to say no is really important.
I think that's a really important point, and it's better to say no rather than take on something you or take on too much and then let people down in their eyes. By being realistic about this. The one diary one is something that I was very guilty of myself before I joined this company, because my wife runs a wedding photography business, which I help her with. So we had the wedding photography diary, I had the work diary, I had the personal diary. And what we ended up doing was, whenever we had an appointment, we used to email about 5 different accounts. So we went in all the right diaries, and it was just nonsense. So we got rid of that. And, the beauty of Outlook is, of course, you can put personal and private events in there, mark them as personal and private. And, it's a real enabler, really. So what else do you find that, Jane, that people say to you when they say they're too busy? What other things tend to come up?
Well, there's never enough time for absolutely anything.
Of course not, no.
And sometimes it's the tasks. There's never enough time to do, I don't know whether I dare mention it, X, Y, or Z, like prospecting, because I haven't got enough time for it. And sometimes the things we don't have enough time for are the things that maybe we don't necessarily want to do, or we don't feel as confident doing. Sometimes I think we go, I haven't got enough time to do that, because it's the last thing on our to-do list every day. And we just don't want to tackle it. There's that great advice, isn't there? Where it talks about, I think it's Eat That Frog, a great book.
Simon Sinek.
Yes. And I love it. It talks about, put the thing that you are dreading, or the thing that you don't really want to do, that big project, handle it first.
Yeah.
Deal with it first, because I think what we tend to do is we avoid some of the things that we don't want to do, and they just still sit there, and they make us feel even more pressured and even more busy because we haven't actually dealt with them. But actually, get on with that as the first task of the day, and get rid of that one, or put all of your good effort and energy into it. You feel a lot better when you've managed to tick off something or complete something that was really, really important.
That's so good.
That's been sat there for a while. I had as well, a colleague, not a colleague, well, an ex-colleague, but another company. He always said one of his biggest sort of time savers was, rather than every Teams meeting that comes up, he would set them at odd times. So if you had a meeting at 9:00, he'd set it at 9:05 or 9:10 was the start of the meeting, and it would still finish at something like 5 to 10. Because
Genius.
He said,
I love that.
Let's be face it, we often don't fulfill, or we overrun by all sorts of garbage in any meeting, so let's give ourselves 5 minutes or 10 minutes before that meeting. That my 9:00 meeting, I've given myself 10 minutes to make sure that I'm fully prepared for every meeting I go into. And 5 minutes at the end where I am sorting out things from that meeting. And I thought, great, I'm having that, please. But I still need to set those times in random ways.
Next time we record a podcast, it's going to be at 9:23 and 14 seconds or something.
Perfect.
Pretty so you're nodding away to that one. That's one you obviously agree with as well.
Yeah, I was thinking that Eat That Frog book's very good, and what he says is that if you have lots of frogs that need to be eaten, i.e., lots of tasks to do, eat the ugliest one first. Because after that, everything gets better. And I think in terms of, if you have something you've been putting off, we just before this recorded this podcast, actually, we were talking about something as a team that we are putting off.
We are,
doing. So we're as guilty. It's about doing that in a couple of ways. One, get it done. But secondly, understand when you are in the best frame, you're kind of, some of us are morning people, some of us are afternoon people. If you have a big important task to do, schedule it when you know your energy levels are high.
That's a great point.
Because a task that is going to be important but tough to do will use up your energy levels. If you do it towards the end of the day when you've done lots of other things, you'll probably end up having to do it again.
That's a really good point.
So you may delay it. So manage those important tasks. And we talk a lot about making a to-do list for every day. Some of us have these very long to-do lists, which we've been annotating for a number of months. And I always say, I'll do you a favour, give me your list and I'll shred it for you. And I'll tell you why. If you had something on your to-do list 3 months ago and you haven't done it yet, I challenge you about how important it is. But all it's doing is every time you get your to-do list out, you're being reminded about how ineffective you are.
Mm.
You know, it's like all these things you haven't done, I haven't done that. So daily to-do lists are, in fact, I've written my daily to-do list already, of course, for today. And they said, this is what I'm going to get done today. These are the important things that I achieve. And it's a really good way to manage your time.
Good points. On this whole topic of things that are difficult to do, I used to have a colleague that used to talk about his too hard pile. It's on the too hard pile, Steve. And normally, because the things that we find too hard are the things that we probably need to do the most, really. So conscious of time and managing time, we're coming towards the sort of half hour that we normally do of a podcast. So I'd like perhaps just get one final thought from both of you in terms of any suggestions or any other thoughts, or anybody listening to this thinking, I just don't have enough time. How can I cope with this? So one from you, Jane, anything you'd like to give as a final thought or a gem to pass on?
Yeah. Breathe. Take a deep breath. Sometimes have a coffee if you are a coffee drinker, but just give yourself a moment when you are planning your day. And I would say just plan your day. And either you do that at the end of the day before, so that you know what you've got coming the next day, or give yourself some time at the beginning of the start of your day, sit down with a coffee, a bit of fresh air, and understand the big 3 things that you need to achieve today, and make those your priorities.
That's a really good point. And I was thinking about that only the other night. There was a program on the BBC about 5 years since the pandemic, obviously. And obviously we were all working from home, and we do routinely anyway, but what I was finding myself doing then was just getting up in the morning, having some breakfast and going straight to my desk and then getting straight into it, really. And I was stopping doing what you suggest, Jane. So what I now do is every morning I'll have 20 minutes where I walk the dog and I mentally run through the things I'm going to do in the day, really, just make sure I've allocated enough time and also what other priorities are. So I think that's a super point. One, whatever it works for you, whether it's going for a run, going for a walk, the gym, whatever works for you as an individual out there, dear listener, just having that sort of 15 minutes to plan the day ahead in your mind mentally is a really, really good tip. Thank you for that one, Jane. One from you, Prue, before we wrap up?
Yeah, it just reminds me of somebody I was speaking to during the pandemic, because we did lots of remote training during the pandemic. And she said that she really missed her cycle to work because it started a day. So even though she was working from home, she used to cycle to work. She literally had her breakfast, got on her bike, did a cycle ride, came back home and got on with work. And it made a massive difference to her kind of ability to do it. I think for me, most of us feel we don't have enough time because we expect too much of ourselves. We think we can get through so much more than we actually can. So when you get into the discipline of writing your daily to-do list, if you never finish your list ever, you write the things that I am going to get done today and you don't finish it, there's a feedback there. It's telling you are underestimating how much time each of these tasks take. So you have to learn to understand your capacity for getting things done, because there's that phrase, isn't there? If you want something done, ask a busy person. But a busy person is busy doing the things that they know they're capable of doing to the standard they need to be done within the time available. So, don't overestimate how much stuff you can get done. Be realistic, and you will feel so much more in control of your time and learn to say no at the right time.
Super point. Thank you both, Jane and Prue, for your thoughts on this today. The whole topic of time management, planning and prioritization is part of our core training material of the training courses that we all run. Just to let you know that if you are looking for training for either for yourself or for your team member that the dates for all our scheduled training courses are on our website right now. So these are courses that run at a scheduled venue, either in Cambridge or Alderley Park in the UK. But we're also now running courses in France and in Switzerland and in Germany 2025 as well. So don't forget to check out those dates on the George James Training website. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, then please do leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. It does help us in lots of weird and wonderful ways. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the show. That way you'll get it coming into your inbox when it comes out every 2 weeks. I'll be back again with another podcast in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, Jane, Prue, thank you very much. Goodbye to you both. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time.